everybody, welcome back to another episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we spend a little bit of time talking about cards from Lord of the Rings, the card game. I'm your host, Dave Walsh.
And I'm Grant Thompson, as always, along for the ride.
And before we get into the card, I just wanted to say that Grant and I decided that we were going to spend a little time talking about a specific deck to kind of mix it up a little bit. And so we picked a slippery Sylvan deck to get us started with this. And the idea is that certain cards only make sense to talk about them within the context of decks that they're kind of specialized for. The example that we had in the past was when we talked about Boots from Erebor. Boots from Erebor makes sense when you're only talking about dwarf decks and hobbit decks, but against the rest of the card pool, they're really, you're not going to run Boots from Erebor in a Sylvan deck. So it was important for us to talk a little bit about cards that really run in certain archetypes. So we chose this slippery Sylvan deck to begin. And Grant, which card are we going to talk about for in this episode?
We are talking about the zero-cost spirit event from the Ninnin Elf, Island Amid Perils, which has an action. Return a Sylvan ally you control to your hand and reduce your threat by X. X is the printed cost of the ally returned to your hand. And
what do you think?
I love it. Like most of these events that are zero cost, I actually love, especially when played correctly and designed correctly. I mean, this in itself is indicative of the Sylvans as you see them in Lothlorien. They are hiding. They strike when they have the superior advantage. And being able to return a Sylvan you control back to your hand, reducing your threat to stop them engaging you, is so thematic. And I've got to say, another quote from my favourite Sylvan: "We dare not by our own trust endanger our land. We live now upon an island amid many perils." From Haldia, the Fellowship of the Ring. And it is another well-designed art on this card by Magali. And that should just say it all.
Yeah. As soon as you talk about art from Magali Villanueva, it's all over about the art. Probably one of the most talented artists in all of this fantasy genre that we have.
So, David, what are your thoughts on my Island Amid Perils?
Yeah, I actually like this card, but I mean, I like it okay for its ability. There's no problem with lowering your threat by whatever, and there's enough variation in card costs. There's enough high cost cards that you can target, Legolas or Haldir or Rumil, to get 4 reduction in cost, and then there's enough mid-range cards, 3 or 2 if you need to. But I found that if there was one of the events that I was going to not have in the deck, that this would be the one that I would cut. Because I feel like as I've played tested this, in general, my threat isn't as big of an issue because of Galadriel's ability. Every round she's lowering your threat by 1 and allowing you to draw a card. So this card would be the one that I could get rid of. That said, I'm going to keep it in the deck because it's just too powerful to be able to kind of use that slippery Sylvan motif, bouncing in and out of play. It's just another card that allows that to happen. And like I've said in all of these episodes for these zero cost events, is that I think that, because you can pull it back into your hand, the Sylvan cost card, you can pick and choose what you want to have, and you're kind of playing out what the next thing is. And so you can bring Island Amid Peril back into, or you can bring the Nath Guide back into your hand, maybe to have it again at the beginning of next round. Or you can bring the Greenwood Archer back into your hand and then replay it with Thranduil's ability to be able to attack something and ready a hero to get even more action advantage. So there's all sorts of reasons to have all of these zero-cost events, because you want to be able to have the flexibility to do what you want to do and kind of customize what you need to do each turn based on those events. So, but I found that the reason why I'm using Island Amid Perils, not all the time, but sometimes, is not to lower my threat, but just to be able to pull something back into my hand. And so because of that, this is probably, I don't know, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's the least favorite of the cards, but, you know, like it's the one that I could probably get rid of out of all of them. And so what do you think, Grant?
Well, like I said, I like the card, and in my own testing of this deck, I actually found I was using it a bit more, but that was mainly because of the fact I play 2-player and not solo.
Right.
So I sometimes used Galadriel for my partner, and then used Island Amid Perils to gain myself the threat reduction, especially when you're going up against a lot of doomed threat.
Mm-hmm.
And out of all the cards, I think that I used the least will probably be Quicker Than Sight, because of the fact that it all depends on shadow card rather than actual anything else, really. And it's the one I would probably say is easier to sideboard than, say, either Islands Amid Peril or Faint Voices.
Yeah, I'm not going to do anything with Faint Voices or Tree People. Those 6 cards are automatically in the deck. But
exactly.
The Islands Amid Peril and Quicker Than Sight. I think Islands Amid Peril for me is the one that I could do with do without the most, do with the least. I don't know how you want to say that, but
yeah. But like I say, that was just my own experience in play testing.
Yeah, when you're playing 2-player, I think that changes the dynamic a little bit about how these guys run. So, and
I also think it's down to the quest you play as well.
Oh yeah,
if you've got a lot of nasty shadow effects, you're going to want to run Quicker Than Sight over Island Amid Perils.
Right.
If you've got a lot of threat increases with doomed and enemies that come in and raise your threat once they attack, you might want to think of using Islands Amid Peril over that.
Right.
It all comes down to the quest and what you're actually playing and who you're playing with.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those feel it out sort of things. You may not want, because the deck itself, I don't know, we're doing this before the final cut of the deck, but, is more than 50 cards, I think, anyways. So, maybe that's a card that you want to trim out just to get it down to 50 cards or closer to 50. Or maybe not. Maybe, I think that there's the idea of bringing a Sylvan back into your hand is vital to the hand, or vital to the deck. So, to have the mechanic and to be able to reliably draw something that allows to pull something back into the hand is good. It's just that the threat lowering isn't, while I'm playing solo, isn't necessarily the thing that...
Which is why I would agree to sideboard instead of cutting cards like we have on this version of the draft of the deck, like Gandalf and Sneak Attack, which don't benefit the idea of the sneaky Sylvans, allowed us to trim it down a bit without losing the core element of the deck. And I think once we actually get down to the nitty-gritty of it, I think we'll eventually find that there's some other cards that we need to include for the nitty-gritty and some other cards that we can trim away.
Right, and as just a disclaimer for all the people out there listening to this, we will post the final there, but we're recording this well in advance of doing this so that we can play test it and get the cards in there and get it running the way that we want to. We may not be able to get a line, the one deck sort of lineup, but we want to make sure it's maximized for best play and most, for most
enjoyment, in all honesty.
Right. And that's why I like this deck, is because it's so fun to play. Like, you're trying to figure out how to beat the encounter deck, and you're just like, well, if I pull this up into play and then pull it back and pull this up, or like I can bring these two guys out. Like I have to worry about my discard pile. I don't know. Like, there's just so many options. So.
Yeah. So for ringing, do you want to ring?
Sure. So let me just say that Grant and I, like we did with the episode, it makes sense again to ring this card against the whole card pool, and then also against cards within the deck. So it wouldn't surprise us if within the card pool you have a ring rating that's really high, and then or really poor, I'm not sure, closer to 10, and then within the deck a card that's closer to 1. And so in this case, I think that against the card pool, this card is really a 9. There's so many other ways to reduce threat that you don't need this. Even within, obviously within Spirit. You have the Caladrim's Greeting, and you have the Elrond's Council, which was even in a deck version before the one that I published to you was. So I don't think you're ever going to run this in anything. So it may be a 9. It may even be a 10, but I'll stick it with a 9 because, I don't know, it does get use in these Sylvan decks. Within the Sylvan deck, I'm going to give it a 2 because I think it's not Faint Voices or Tree People, but it's definitely a card that can help you and feed the beast in terms of slipping the Sylvans in and out of play. What do you think?
Well, for me, I've used Island Amid Perils outside of Sylvan deck, where I've run a few Sylvan allies like the Sylvan Refugee, and some other Sylvans higher cost, likes of Haldir and what have you, where I've just brought them back for that threat reduction. And it doesn't always work to my advantage, but I have done it. So I'm giving it an 8 outside in the general card pool because it does get used. It doesn't get used massively. It's on the same version as Faint Voices for me in the entire card pool. Not great because you've got access to Elrond's Council, Galadrim's Greeting, etc., etc. Right. But inside the deck, I'm giving it a 1. Now, that's mainly down to me playing multiplayer. That threat reduction, if I'm using Galadriel for my partner or for somebody else, and then using Island Amid Perils to drop me threat, or if I'm using Galadriel as a bonus to questing with Nenya, and I haven't gotten out any readying for her so that I can use her ability later, it's always nice to have that little bit extra for threat reduction. So that's my thoughts anyway.
And there you go. So Grant and I mostly agree. We're off by 1 each way, but that's fine. So I'll allow him to be off this time.
He allows me nothing. I'll get it in the neck later.
So join us next time as Grant still stays along for the ride and we talk about more cards from the card pool. Have a great day, everybody. And if you're interested in finding this or any of our back episodes of Card Talk, feel free to search YouTube where you can find our flagship video episodes with the username Card Talk 2018. Or you can search the RSS feed, cardtalk2018.libsyn.org, for our extended audio versions of our podcast. Or you can find us on Facebook at Card Talk 2018. And if you have any questions for Grant or myself or for both of us, feel free to email us at cardtalk2018@gmail.com.